Morena.
E te mea ngaroa. Tēnā koe, tēnei rā, e whakangātahi nei koe i a mātou o te kaituna. Ara mai nei, te whānanga anō, ngā hohonutanga ake. O ngā āhuatanga o te whenua nei. Nā reira, tēnā koe ia pirihira, ia moana, i ngā mata, huhua. Huri noa te motu. E tuku atu nei e mātau kia koe. Me te tūmana ko kia tāmai ki te wā mō mātau, a ka whai atu mātau i roto. I roto ho rātau, te whai atu o rātau tapu ai, ki te pairau ki te huinga o te kaurai. Nā re ko mātau tēnei wā, e tuku whakamoe me te atu ane kia koe. Nā reira, kia tata mai koe kia mātau. Ke heke katoa i ngā kōrero, ka wānanga i ake mātau. Ki runga, i tāhau e pai ei, i runga no hori o mātau he hia. Ana ka puta i tēnā. I runga te matua, te tamatu wairua tapu. Amen.
Amen.
Tēnā koe warata.
A tēnā tātou katoa. Nau mai hoki mai, ki te hui tua toru, e pāna ki tēnei whenua tupuna, nā koutou. Nō reira ko tēnei te mihi atu ki a koutou. Ka hui ki a koe te rangatira, nau tā tātou hui e whakatūwhera. Nō reira tēnā koe. Kei te tautoko nā mihi ki ngā mate, pūhua o te rohi nei, pirihira mā, koutou e te whānau pani, tēnā koutou. Tātou te hungora ko tēnei te mihi mai o haki a koutou i roto i tēnei tino kaupapa o te rā. Ara te whakapiki i ngā taonga o koromā o kuima. Nō reira tēnā koutou katoa. Leo Watson's my name. I've been asked to assist with the facilitation of the Tumu Kaituna 14 engagement hui, and this is our third engagement hui today. I cannot be physically with the trustees today. I'm based in Napier, and I'm sorry I can't be with you all there. But like others who are watching online, we're using technology to the best effect that we can under these difficult circumstances with the coronavirus. My acknowledgement to Waratau for your opening, and to all of you as the trustees who are here, in particular having lost your good mate and a visionary for the land, Pirihira. So thank you for participating. We put the hui back, we postponed it in recognition of her loss and to tautoko te whānau. So there has been a delay of a couple of weeks, but we feel that was entirely appropriate. And we're here now to carry on with the engagement hui, picking up on the feedback that's been provided through hui number 1 and number 2. And in particular for those who are joining us again, thank you for your continued support. We're going to be providing a lot of new information today, which builds on the comments that we have received from you. So we hope, and I'm confident, that this hui will be providing some fresh information, and we look forward to your engagement on that material. I'm going to ask Alex if you can help us please with the slides and also some preliminary matters about how we're going to run our hui today. Can I hand it to you please?
Ka pai, thanks Leo. Simon, if we can go live on the slides, and we'll start making our way through those. If we just move forward there, Jeff, probably to slide number the next slide. And I think Uncle Waldo's sort of spoken, given a bit of a mihi to Auntie Pirihira. We've got a photo of her just coming up shortly. We're just having some technical troubles with our slides. There we go. So just a lovely photo, and I'll give a bit of a background to that photo as well. That was Auntie Piri's 85th birthday at the Queen Elizabeth Hotel. I think it was just last year. It's a lovely photo of her. Yeah, so there's a little bit of recognition for her there. If we go into the next slide, as Leo's just outlined, we have Amber Tare who's online. You won't see her with the trustees. She's just working over the background there. She'll be contacting you just to get any further details if you haven't registered, or just getting clarification of who you are, and so we can make sure we have you on the attendance register today. If there are a group of you, of owners that are at one location, and it does happen from time to time, if we could just get everyone's name that are owners or descendants of a whānau trust, so we can accurately sort of record everyone as being in attendance today. In terms of the hui today, and it's very similar to previous hui, we have a couple of buttons down the bottom. You'll see a chat function and a Q&A. The chat function there is really for people to have a kōrero, but what we'll really be monitoring is that question and answers panel. So if you do have a question, do pop it in that Q&A panel there, and we'll make sure that we sort of try and answer it at some point throughout the presentation. Might not be straight away, and we'll find the best place to answer it there. It is webinar style, so you will see us, you will see Leo. We also have another presenter coming on a little bit later on, Martin Udall, and you'll be able to see him. So that's the way we'll look to sort of communicate going forward. And if we just pop to the next slide, there's a little bit of what it looks like when you open up those panels, that Q&A panel. So just to reiterate that, if you can use the Q&A panel to ask your questions, just so we can try and keep track of it. We will scan through the chats to monitor things, but sometimes we might miss it in there. So that's the way through our proceedings today. I'll hand it back over to you, Leo, to take us through the agenda.
Kia ora, Alex. So we're going to invite shortly Uanuku to just touch on the cultural and historical background slides. He has presented this previously, and the information that we're also going to be providing by way of the previous presentations are all available online. So we've decided that for this hui number 3, we will almost take a lot of that as read and move to some information that builds on the feedback that you provided and the work that's been done behind the scenes. So for the first little part of this agenda, there'll be a very brief summary of what's been presented earlier, but we do ask and encourage you to go onto the website to view both the recordings of the previous hui and the slides and the presentations that are up there, and to provide feedback through to the trustees. We're going to look at housing proposals, and that's going to be introduced and spoken to by a housing expert, Martin Udall, who I'll introduce shortly. There will be a slide or two from Alex around the development costs. People have been asking questions about that, so he'll speak to that. Jeff Fletcher's going to look at the land exchange options in more detail. So we had put forward the overall scheme of how this might work if owners wanted to proceed with this, and he's going to speak to what the land exchange might look like, what options there are, and how the land might be valued. We're going to update you on the rates situation. That's particularly important both now, but also how rates might be applicable if the housing development goes ahead. So I'll speak to some of the changes that have been made to Te Ture Whenua Māori and the Rating Act that will be of interest. There's also going to be some slides on the Trustee Rotation and Elections, which I've just jumped over there in the agenda, but I'll come to that in detail, picking up on the comments that have been made. and then we will be looking at the processes for voting. What would happen in the next hui, and heading towards how can owners not just engage around feedback, but provide their decision and their vote on the proposals. As part of the agenda too, we invited for owners to register as to whether they wish to have speaking time. So we've been really grateful for your comments that have come through on chat, and they've come through on the Facebook page and social media, and we've tried to respond to those as well as we can. But we have a request from one of the owners to speak, and just prior to the towards the end of the agenda, we'll give that owner time to speak. You'll be able to hear her. The way the webinar works is the camera won't be turned on, but we'll certainly have that owner giving her kōrero, and we'll do our best to respond either during the hui or certainly thereafter. And then I'll be finishing with next steps. What are the next processes ahead of us? Essentially, there will be a further engagement hui where we're going to be putting resolutions for consideration by owners. As I said at the last hui, we really want to craft those resolutions together with you to make sure that when the time comes to voting on these, you have had ample input into how the decision might roll out. Okay, thanks for whoever's running the slides. If we can go to the next one, please. So this is just a brief slide, especially for those who are new to the engagement process. Welcome. We have had 4 engagement hui planned, and we've obviously had to grapple with the practical constraints around COVID. We would have loved to have convened the hui at Marae. We still have a desire to do that when the restrictions allow us to do so, and when the marae are back operational. There is also a request for a site visit onto the land, and I understand that the trustees are making arrangements for that to occur, planning to get owners onto the whenua and to look at how the things that we've been discussing over the last couple of months would pan out on the land itself. So there are the dates of the hui. We're up to hui number 3. We have tried to find novel ways of having you engage with these issues. We have a Facebook page and social media outlets, but also just old-fashioned contact trustees and make sure that you are giving your feedback to them. And we are regularly wanting to update our messaging to take that into account. Just to note before we get off that slide that the 4th hui is scheduled for the 30th of April, with venue and details to be confirmed, and we might be looking to have that a mix of both Zoom, online, and ākanohi, ātinana. Now I'll introduce Unuku. If you can take the floor, please, for your slides in relation to the cultural and historical background to the whenua. Tēnā koe.
Ai, tēnā koe, Leo. Tēnā hoki koe waratau I tuku atu I tīnoi ki te rungarawa me tō kōrero mō Pirihira. And just following on that, just a quick note, I was fortunate enough to attend her service, and it just shows that you may be working with someone for a long, long time, but it's often not until the tangihanga and the service that you find out other things. And it was a wonderful service, and I had no idea about the family's interest and involvement with poetry, which was fantastic. Nō reira Pirihira, haere atu koe, haere. And of course I understand that with the passing of Moana, it has a huge impact on you, Leo, considering the field that you work in and your long association with him over the years. Now, I also understand that nearly 30 of you who are beamed in today, it's the first time around, but for the other 30 who are probably very tired of listening to my voice, I'm going to try to go through this talk as fast as possible, but I really do encourage, as Leo and Alex have, for you to go online and have a look at the material there so you can digest it and hopefully get a great love for history that will get you digging further. All right, so the first thing is the arrival and settlement of our canoe that whereby we all have shares in this block. Around 1350, the Tarawa canoe. The descendants quickly took over the area because there weren't many other people, if any, there at the time, all the way from Maua or Mount Maunganui through to beyond Pukahina and back inland, heading towards the Rotorua Lakes, and then the Tohunga went a bit further down to Taupo. But with the movement of a particular group of people based around the Chief Te Rangi Hauhiri, who came from the east coast and headed this way, Waratau followed him many generations later, but he came through, and at the Battle of Pōporo Huamea at Maketu, conquered the Tarawa people living there and sent them scattered over the region, and also moved on to the mount, which they took through the Battle of Te Kōkōwai. So always be careful of Trojan horses and kete with red ochre in them. Thank you. But as time went on, through connections, marriages that took place after those battles I mentioned, people from Tarawa started moving down from the mountains of Otawa and Rangiuru and from the Rotorua Lakes back towards Maketu, especially with the arrival of Mr. Tapsell, the original Dane, because of the growth of a new economy, and came back basically to cut flax so that they could raise funds to buy ships and, unfortunately, guns. The troubles that were starting to happen inland between Te Arawa and Tainui certainly spilt over to the coast, where there had already been some altercations going on between coastal people and Ngāpuhi. This led to a back and forth, which ended up with the Ngāti Whakaue chief Ngāhuru being killed at Maketu. Keep going. And one of his relations, Kahawai, from Ngāti Rangiuhi, wanted to exact revenge as soon as possible, but it took a while to convince the rest of Te Arawa to take part in that. But he headed towards his relations at Otawa, Waitaha, and waited there for the rest of them to arrive. Eventually they arrived, and they attacked Tumu Pa on the 23rd of April 1836. And if you're looking at the photos surrounding this presentation, you will see where the cut, what they refer to as the cut, the pa was right on the end of that, and part of it has since been destroyed by putting the cut through. Kahawai was the one that wanted the engagement the most, and he was also the first to die in the battle. And hence the ngeri that Ngāti Rangiuhi still uses, ka taka te marama ki te one I te tumu. And I'm sure the other hapu involved have references to that battle in their waiata and ngeri and such like. Well, it's probably quite hard to see, but a quick overview. If you look towards the left of that map, you can, I'm not talking about the actual edge of the map, but heading east, or to your right, you can see a line that goes from the Kaituna River up to the top to a place called O Tumu Matawhero, and then all the way to the end of that tongue of land, to the original estuary. That was what constituted the Tumu Kaituna block. On that was several pa, and you can see them listed there. Te Kōpua was a Uenuku Kōpako, pa Te Karakia Ngāti Rangiuhi, then Te Paro was the base for Ngāti Whakaue, and so forth towards the end of the spit of land. Now, even though it was a decisive battle and that Ngaiterangi had been driven back to the mouth of the Wairake stream, which comes out at the Papamoa Reserve, there were skirmishes after that, but essentially the area stayed under the control of Te Arawa and was settled sporadically really, because people were trying to maintain their homelands back at the lakes and also out at the shore. Makatu had much more permanent settlement than Te Tumu Kaituna itself. On the 2nd of May 1883 was the first court hearing to determine who were the rightful owners for the block, and you can see there listed that Ngāti Tūnohopu, which went in as a separate category, and the rest of Ngāti Whakaue were awarded it, along with the 3 hapu that pertain to us, and while we're all meeting here today, Ngāti Rangiuhi, Ngāti Wenuku Kōpako, and Ngāti Rangi Te Aorere. They were represented respectively by Hori Te Raho Atua. So if you're a clerk that's joined in, that's your karaua. Tāmati Hapimana, if you're in a Callaghan, well, that's you people. And Te Kiri Karamu, and that's one of the ancestors of Pirihira that we've just recently lost. And also, the people out of wanting to be generous, they put in other people's, very few, from different hapu. Okay. Now, after that, came to the partitioning of the block, which happened in 1890. And so what happened there, it's very hard to see, but towards the top of the map, you can see what now basically constitutes the Tumu Kaituna 14. And in that, starting on the western side, number 1, that's Ngāti Wenuku Kōpako, they got 156 acres. The next block in between, Ngāti Rangi Te Aorere, got 101 acres. And then TK3 went to Ngāti Rangiuhi with 303 acres. What you can't see on the map is on the other side of the river, heading below number 3 and heading eastwards with 3 more blocks, 4, 5 and 6, and what were the awards were made to the hapu, but in the opposite order. So you can see that TK4 went to Ngāti Rangiuhi, 751 acres. Next one, 5, Ngāti Rangi Te Aorere, 226 acres, and then Wenuku Kōpako, 353 acres. Yeah, and if you can go on to the next slide. So there you can see the talk, the discussion about that judgment. I've put there partitioned into 13 blocks, but that's not true. It was originally 12. Okay, and I've already talked about which blocks were awarded to our respective hapu. The changes for, the only big change for the witnesses was with Rangi Te Aorere, and their main witness was Hemi Kōkiri, who is the ancestor of the current chairman of the block. 4, 5 and 6, those are the ones that I referred to before, that below to the south of the Kaituna River. They were sold to the Crown. And that total was 1,330 acres out of the original total of 1,920 acres. So we lost the sold, but of course people sell generally under duress. And the other thing too, at the time, shortly after the 1890s, there was a recession in this country, and most recessions, as we know, hit Māori badly, and even in those times, and that would have led to the sale. It's also quite extensive wetlands there, but it also shows that once you sell land, you lose your connection to it, because there is now a reserve there, a wetlands reserve, and the involvement of the 3 hapu was, if anything, by accident, because unfortunately you leave the space and you lose interest and involvement. Now, 1, 2 and 3 were broken up into smaller things. Only one small section was sold, that was in number 1, by Ngāti Wenuku Kōpako, but all the rest were then re-amalgamated, please, Jeff, back into what you can see up with the yellow kite on it, the Tumu Kaituna 14. And it's unfortunate that the map's not good enough to show you where the triangle, but it's in the bottom left-hand corner of the block that had been previously sold. But if you look at that, and all the way out towards the tongue of land heading towards Makutu, you can see that there's very little of the Tumu Kaituna still that is Māori land, none whatsoever on the southern side of the Kaituna stream. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the potted history. I hope that you endeavour to find out more about the history, because it's an exciting history. It has, love, war, blood, you name it, it's all in there. But the most important thing for us is, now what are we going to do with that history? And how are we going to turn that into something that's going to go forward with us as part of the history that we'll create for our children and mokopuna? And so one of the things that we have to think about, besides the development of the block, besides housing, is how do we keep that cultural, historical contact with what our tupuna have bequeathed to us. Nō reira, koe nā hoki te wero ki a tātou, tātou e titiro whakamuana, kei wareware ia tātou ngā mea o muri nei. Tēnā koutou.
Tēnā koe unuku. Kia ora. Moving through the agenda, this slide had a number of slides behind it in the earlier presentations, but we're just going to use the overview slide here. And I again encourage those who are new to the hui to please go back to the earlier presentations for the detail. But essentially, the trustees had put forward to you for engagement some guiding principles for the block, and they had set them out under 7 of those headings. From our reading of the feedback, the principles seem to be falling in favour of where the owners are coming from, and we're getting some good support for that. I want to just deal firstly with the key issue around developing the land without selling it. So the retention of your Māori land has been regarded as the key principle for the Tumu Kaituna trustees. I've just responded in writing to one of the comments from Renee, and I know that the proposals can be complex, but the suggestion that the land would be sold or even gifted away is just completely erroneous based on the proposals that have been put forward. And I know that I've come to this late in the piece, and there's been a lot of history and quite a bit of litigation between owners and the trustees. So I'm not at all suggesting that it's easy to find a fresh start and make a commitment to listening carefully to the proposals. But I do, as I had said at the earlier hui, encourage owners to trust that this is going to be a proper fresh start in the way in which the land is sought to be developed. And the key aspect of that, from what I can see, is that the trustees are saying, if a development could happen on the land for the benefit of your owners, how could the infrastructure on that land be used in such a way as to not involve the alienation, the sale of your land? And so essentially the nub of the proposal around that side, which we'll get into shortly, is that your land would be available for development by way of infrastructure, using easements or leases, these types of mechanisms, which does not involve sale. And in exchange for the right for the council, for instance, to put a road through your land, rather than selling them the land or having the land taken off you, that is off the table, the council are agreeing that they would look to an easement over that land, so you retain ownership. And in exchange for that easement, they would be prepared to look at the transfer to you of additional land that they hold. So not only is there a commitment to retaining the ownership of your current Tumu Kaituna 14 block, but there is a proposal here that would see you increase your land holdings. Now, that might not find support from owners. That's absolutely fine. But I do encourage us to engage on the nature of the proposal itself and not get too tied up in some of the mamai that's been carried by some owners about previous historical engagement. This is a fresh start. It's a fresh proposal. And I've got to say, I'm not a big fan of councils, that's for sure. But I have to say that in my experience, the Tauranga City Council here has been quite courageous to look at, all right, so you don't want to sell any of your land. How could we make this development happen and still use mechanisms that are a win-win? So again, the proposal would be an easement over your land or leases over your land for infrastructure purposes. That's for the road through there and the large active reserve where some playgrounds and sports fields might be used. And the exchange of that right to use that land for broadly public purposes would be compensated by way of the provision of additional land currently held by Tauranga City Council. And when we get to the part of that agenda, we're going to go into details around where those areas of land might be and give you some idea of how that might be valued. So the other principles here, Unuku's spoken about that, ensuring your history and cultural connection is represented and respected. I know that the trustees really heard clearly some great feedback from the earlier hui. The idea of where can we be visible as a people in any development? How do our cultural principles and our tikanga find visibility in the way in which we develop the land? How can we create a community whereby you as owners can be absolutely proud to be living and associated with a development that is Māori and has a set of Māori values that underpin it? And I can really hear that because so often developments are done around you or over the top of you, and you have to react to somebody else's vision. So the idea of having your cultural connection clearly underpinning and represented in the development is critical. Housing, obviously, we'll focus on, that's a major need, and there'll be a presentation shortly. Looking at the effective use of community spaces and places for the owners to get back onto your whenua and to enjoy it. We've talked about the holiday park and other initiatives in the details of earlier hui. Commercial opportunities, employment, education and training, they're all essential as to making sure that you are the winners out of a development rather than providing the asset for the benefit of others. And then creating a sustainable income, I think, is crucial there too. The idea that obviously the income at the moment that is coming from the sand mining would be terminated. So how do you ensure that the trust can create a sustainable income base into the future? And again, all of those slides have been detailed previously, and we do invite your feedback on those. Can I have the next slide, please? I'm just going to speak to this point about the trustee rotation and elections. These slides are new, that we have put forward the trustee rotation idea previously. And what we've tried to do is summarize and respond to some of the feedback. So there are currently 6 trustee positions on the trust, and the aspiration is to have 7 trustees on the board. There is currently an owner dispute as to whether an election should have occurred for that 7th position. So there's an application at the moment before the Chief Judge to clarify that. I've just put in there the reference to the 2018 Māori Land Court decision, which reduced the trustees by 1 after the resignation of Keita Emari and vested the land and the assets. And you'll see the 6 trustees there listed. And of course, we've lost Pirihira Fenwick. So there are the 6 names of the trustees. So just to be clear, the trustees take the view that they do consider that the optimum number of trustees is 7, but they are certainly not in breach by operating currently. However, the trustees have heard clearly about the importance of refreshing the trusteeship, and it in fact was them that brought the proposal forward for how to rotate the trustees. So if we can go to the next slide, this is the note that with the sad passing of Pirihira, the trustees are seeking feedback on an amended proposal. So we've split this into 2 aspects. Firstly, that an election would be held within the next 4 months for 2 new trustees to bring the total of the number of trustees to 7. So in other words, quite separate from the rotation proposal, which would require a variation to the trust order. the aspiration here is to have an election to fill the 2 vacancies, and that election could be held over the next 4 months. We are thinking a time frame that would allow both the feedback from you on this, but also the election to be organised and probably run by way of a similar voting process that we're proposing for these types of engagement, i.e. Postal and electronic, to get the best coverage. So that takes a while to get set up. And then, of course, we've got to go to the Māori Land Court to have those new elected trustees appointed by the court. In addition to that, there would be a separate process to allow for the trust order to be varied, to bring in a trustee rotation scheme. And so we're going to go through a process of setting out what that might look like, picking up on the feedback that you've given, and that would actually require you to indicate as owners whether you give sufficient support for amendments to your trust order. And if there is sufficient support, then we can go to the Māori Land Court, have the trust order varied, and bring in a rotational scheme. Kia ora. Next slide, please. So what we've done here is highlight it in the sort of the orange text where the earlier proposals have been amended following some feedback. This would be the rotation thing. So please make it clear that this would happen. So there will be a trustee election this year, regardless of this particular slide. This would be in addition to what's been proposed. So there would be elections every 2 years for 2 positions to provide for the rotation of trustees. We think the 7 trustees would hold office for 4 years, and every 2 years you get a staggered election cycle. Those retiring trustees, whoever they may be in the future, could seek re-election. We've thought about the way in which nominees could be put forward. We think that the best approach is that they should be an owner in the trust itself, or at least descended from an owner. There has been feedback about that point, that nominees should, to stand as a trustee, should only be registered owners. Others have suggested that there is a good catchment already amongst the owners and that you don't need to look to the descendants of owners. We've had feedback also that there is an important need to bring in the rangatahi, the younger view, and those who have skills who may not yet be owners because their parents perhaps are already on the ownership list. So the way that we could make sure that there is a range of skills available to stand on the trust would be to ensure that you are either an owner or descended from an owner. There's a new suggestion here that we're asking for feedback on, that nominees should provide evidence of endorsement from the affiliated hapu of the land that nominee affiliates to. We think this might reflect the importance of hapu visibility and involvement in the whenua. In other words, and I've drafted these types of deeds before, if you were going to stand as a nominee, you would fill out a statutory declaration form, giving all your details, advising that you are qualified to meet the various criteria, that you are not disqualified under the Act. For instance, there are certain types of criminal offences which would disqualify you. There are certain issues around mental capacity that have to be declared. But as part of that declaration, there would be a declaration that you have received some form of hapu endorsement from the hapu that you affiliate to. Now, we're interested in feedback on that. It might be, for instance, that the person seeking to stand as a nominee is required to go to the hapu entity or show kaumātua from the hapu are endorsing you to stand as a nominee. And that can be part of the process whereby when the nominees go forward to an election, there has been a visible connection back to the hapu that are associated with the land. In addition to that, we put forward some criteria that nominees should have, and there's been good feedback on that. If you go down to the bottom of that slide, you'll see that we've crossed out the NZQA approved qualification as one of the options. There was quite a bit of feedback that was perhaps setting the bar too high. So that's been reworded in the second bullet point up from the bottom, experience or qualifications that could positively contribute to trust governance. We can think about the wording and do perhaps some fine tuning of that. The idea is that nominees should be able to demonstrate that they have experience in Māori land governance or can contribute positively to that by some form of experience or qualifications in their life. Going to the top of that series of bullet points, there is a suggestion that there be a requirement or a request for evidence of experience and knowledge of tikanga. And this is an important point to get your reaction on too, because it may well be that some are able to contribute significantly to the trusteeship who don't necessarily have a working knowledge of tikanga. I have drafted deeds in the past whereby we have asked for a trustee or a nominee to show a commitment to being involved with or learning about tikanga and reo. In other words, rather than trying to create a barrier for those who perhaps through no fault of their own do not have the experience in tikanga yet, it may be that as they come onto the board, they are committing themselves to having some sort of program, either within their own hapu or whānau, through their own kaumātua, or through some learning to positively contribute to tikanga and te reo within their own selves. So in summary, there is a range of options there for how nominations might work. At the moment, none of this is in your trust order. So the trust deed doesn't set out any of these details. As far as the elections that we're proposing to occur this year, they would be happening under the current trust deed, which is really quite open-ended as to the nominations. And we would be wanting feedback from you as to whether some of this thinking could come into play during this year's election. But ultimately, the slide that you're seeing here today would be a set of criteria or a set of rules that would go into a draft trust order that would find favour from the owners, go into the Māori Land Court process, and then would form the basis for your elections in the future. That would form the basis of your new rules. So there's quite a bit of information there. It's building on what we've already provided, and certainly we endorse you coming back to us with feedback. The reason I'm speaking to this is twofold. One is I'm just giving some overview as to the legal mechanisms, but secondly, it allows the trustees themselves who are listening to not be putting forward proposals to you that might be seen to be in conflict with their own trustee positions. So I'm happy to propose the trustee election and rotation system is a really sensible way forward and tidies up your trust deed. So what would be the next step? We'd seek feedback, we'd put a draft proposal through to the next hui, including the clauses of the trust order, so that you can see how this would actually work. And then, of course, we'd ask for a vote in due course on the variation of the trust order. Based on that voting outcome, the variation would be put to the Māori Land Court. If it got approval through the Māori Land Court, that would become your new set of rules for the elections, and we would run the trustee rotation elections next year based on those new rules. Kia ora. Our next topic relates to housing, and I want to introduce to you an expert in housing that we have engaged, or the Trust has engaged, to provide expertise, initially to make an application for some feasibility funding to make sure that the housing work can be properly considered within the overall development. So feasibility funding through Te Puni Kōkiri has been sought, and that would allow us to really drill into whether housing and to what scope and how much housing and what type of housing could be developed. Martin Udale has got over 35 years experience in planning and delivery of major projects. We welcome him here today. He has been involved in various governance and advisory roles in terms of kāinga ora. He's also acted as an advisor to Te Kawerau Make on post-settlement governance commercial assets. He's been involved with Te Motu Hiaro Charitable Trust, that's the development out at Puketutu Island, and involved also with Ngaitahu and other bodies in terms of major developments as well. Those are aspects relating to his Māori involvement with Māori organisations, but he's got a range of experience with housing and property development across the motu. Nō reira, Martin, tēnā koe. Hopefully you can hear us all right, and if you can make sure that you are unmuted, we'll ask you to go through the slides for the whānau. Kia ora.
Thank you, Leo, and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm not sure if you can see me or not, but I will go through a series of slides around housing. Leo, if I get into too much detail or skip over things you think need a little bit more explanation, please pull me up. Otherwise, we will get going. So, as Leo said, my background's been in commercial property development. In the last 20 years, a lot of that in large-scale housing projects. I've done quite a lot of work down in the Bay of Plenty, a lot of work with Tauranga City Council around growth and new housing, and was very involved in the early Blue Haven Wairiki development assessment work. So I have some knowledge, but not deep knowledge of the particular area in which your land is situated. As Leo said, we've currently got an application into TPK and HUD for funding for a detailed feasibility, and we actually have a call on that next week, which is the first response we've had from them. So that will carry it forward and hopefully bring forward money to undertake the detailed feasibility, as Leo said. Jeff, next slide, perhaps. As we think about housing in industry jargon, you'll often come across a term called the housing continuum or the housing spectrum. And really that's about addressing and providing a range of housing choices and solutions to meet the needs of different people at different stages in their life and different, if you like, positions and circumstances in life. So the range of housing we could provide here could go from emergency and social housing, and there are examples, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in future slides, right through to just private ownership. And there's both a range of housing choice in terms of how you might occupy or own that house. Then there is a range of the types of housing we might build as well. So they could be single level housing for kamatua or older people. They could be family housing, 5-bedroom family housing at the other end. So it's both how you occupy the house and the type of house you occupy, and getting the right mix is something that we would work through in detail as part of the feasibility. Jeff, the next slide, and there's quite a lot of detail on this next slide, and probably best worked through offline. But what this endeavours to do is to talk to examples, and they're not intended to be specific, they're just made up examples that might give you an idea that if you're a 70-year-old owner and you're wanting a unit in a community of elderly residents, and that you can pass it on, there are options to do that. And then this talks to those options. So it could be a license to occupy in a kamatua village, where you could own the home and be able to transfer that on to your children or your grandchildren. And the funding for that can come through a number of channels, and none of this is exhaustive or necessarily where we will end up, but it's certainly indicative of what's out there at the moment. So there's funding from government, significant funding from government, as you may be aware, available for Māori housing, both infrastructure and house building. Kāinga Ora are increasingly interested in co-ventures and joint ventures and different ways of delivering housing for Māori and for other people. So their remit is now much wider than it used to be. We can look at progressive home ownership schemes, shared ownership schemes, and different types of rental. So it could be social rental, could be affordable rental, could be market rental. Equally, if you're a young example 4, if you're young people starting out and you're looking for an affordable home to rent and then possibly buy, that could be structured through a community housing trust, which could be set up by the trust itself. It could do that on its own. It could do it in joint venture with an established community housing trust who could bring operational knowledge and experience. And again, there are a range of funding models. So what this slide is trying to show is sort of the owners is that there are a range of ways in which people can access housing. There are a range of ways in which they can that the payment, whether that's rental or ownership, can be facilitated for those owners. So I'd encourage you to look at this in some detail, but it's that's what it's trying to show. Jeff, we might get on to the next slide. Hopefully we'll get on to the next slide. Oh, sorry, we are. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong screen. These next series of slides I'll go through quite quickly. This talks about a little bit about who partners might be, where the money might come from for the trust to undertake housing and to enable the land to be developed. So there are, for example, what's called a build, own, operate, transfer model, and this could be a partnership with Kāinga Ora where it could build houses on the land, on your land under a lease or a license to occupy arrangement, and after a certain number of years, those houses could either revert to the ownership of the trust or some other arrangement, but it's not contingent on selling the land to Kāinga Ora, nor indeed Kāinga Ora owning that land, forever. And Kāinga Ora are actively working on these sorts of arrangements at the moment, and they'd be very interested to explore those with the trust. Next slide, maybe, Jeff. One of the things you might hear a fair bit about and be familiar with is the concept of shared equity, or what's also called progressive home ownership. That's where, as an owner of a house, you might initially own 60 or 70% of the house and fund that. And in this instance, the trust could own the balance, so the 30 or 40% balance. And the benefit of that is it allows, obviously, for a lower mortgage to be taken out by a member as the homeowner. And then over a period of 10 years, typically, they would progressively acquire the balance so that at the end of that period, they might then own 100% of the interest in the house. New Zealand Housing Foundation has been doing this for many years now and is highly experienced. And I think they've done over 1,000 homes now in this model, and they were the pioneer of that in New Zealand. More locally, and Jeff Fletcher, I think, is familiar with this, Ngā Potiki has developed a Manawa Progressive Home Ownership Limited entity, and that's providing progressive home ownership for its members. Tamaki Regeneration is a large-scale urban renewal and regeneration project in the Glen Innes, Point England area in Auckland. I was involved in that for 10 years, and that has, again, a large progressive home ownership work stream as part of its redevelopment of housing and enabling people to get into home ownership. So these are not things that are new or unusual, and there are good models out there which could be adopted and adapted to suit the specific needs of the trust and its members. There is potential government funding available. There's a progressive home ownership fund through Housing and Urban Development, and that has an iwi and Māori pathway as well. So, you know, there are real opportunities in that space. Jeff, we might go to the next slide. It's possible that the trust could establish a community housing trust of its own. That entity, separate to the trust as the landowner, could then develop housing which the housing trust or the community housing organisation would own. That could be rental accommodation. It could also develop and provide progressive home ownership, shared equity housing. It could also provide both social rental and affordable rental models. So the benefit of a community housing trust is it's also able to access other funding streams that might not be available to the trust itself as a landowner. For example, those might be funding streams through MSD to support social rental, or indeed affordable rental through the accommodation supplement, or what's called the income-related rent supplement, or the IRRS in industry jargon. So I think it's just trying to demonstrate there's lots of avenues about how we can go about developing housing across a range of needs and typologies. Jeff, next slide. Transitional housing is an area that Kāinga have already expressed an interest in partnering on. They would potentially provide housing which could allow members to move into transitional housing, and then, if you remember the Housing Continuum slide, to then hopefully progress from transitional housing into affordable rental or social rental, and in time, ideally into home ownership. We can wrap programs around that, and it's something that the Housing Foundation does very well in, and I work with Tamaki Regeneration in preparing people to move from transitional housing to rental housing to different forms of home ownership. So this could be an early start. One of the benefits of this is it might provide some early infrastructure, and then over time that housing could potentially be relocated, or indeed could become owned by the trust itself. So that's probably enough on housing. But I think the message is we're looking at a wide range of housing types to meet the different needs of members at different stages in their life. And there are plenty of examples out there we can learn from, and plenty of funding streams that we can seek to access to enable housing to occur.
Martin, tēnā koe. Thank you for that. So as you say, this feasibility application has gone in. A lot of this that Martin's talked about is providing a broad overview to the whānau as to what is possible. And it's a range of housing options that's possible without alienating and selling your land. So thank you, Martin, for that. As he says, a lot of the detail there is considerable and can be gone through on the website in due course when you're ready. Just before we move on to the next slides, as a facilitator, I'm noting a lot of the comments coming through from owners and trying to pick up on some of the themes there. I think two of the key themes is that one, there's a sense from some who are making comments that you're being dictated to in terms of this type of information, or that decisions have been made for you in advance, or even that some process is ticking the box for engagement. So I'm not sure how best to ensure that you have some faith in the integrity of the system. I can put my own integrity on the line and say that I wouldn't be involved in an engagement process if it was ticking the box. What I had asked the trustees to do was listen to the feedback around options and provide you some information that's different from the earlier hui. And that's why Martin's involvement has been useful, I think, just to say to owners, look, housing options aren't actually doable. in a range of ways, and I think it's useful to have that information for owners. The other key theme that's coming through is the fact that all trustees need to stand down before anything can happen. And this has come up as a regular theme in the earlier hui. I can just respond to the those comments as I had in the earlier hui. The trustees themselves are validly appointed. There were allegations made in an attempt to remove them, and the court case was not successful. What the trustees are trying to do here is find a balance between their right to carry on as trustees and progress this, but on the other hand, a recognition that there needs to be a refresh and an ability for owners to participate in trustee elections. And it's really a matter of finding that balance. So for some of you who don't agree with that and believe that everyone needs to stand down before the development or any discussion like this occurs, please do understand that there is a need to find a balance here between the appropriate and valid continuation of the trust with the options that are currently available on the table as part of the Tumu development, but on the other hand, ensuring that you as owners have a chance to vote on the elections and trustees. And the type of model that has been put forward today, I think moves that a long way forward. An election this year for 2 positions, and then a commitment to a rotation scheme of trustees starting from next year. But for those who are not convinced by that, we're certainly hearing your views. For other other owners, if you've got views on that and wish to express through the social media, we would welcome that as well. Ultimately, if there was going to be a removal of the trustees, that would have to happen by way of an application to the Māori Land Court, and the trustees have indicated that they prefer this model to ensure there is institutional knowledge coming through and a refreshing of those who can take the journey into the next into the future. So just those comments, I just wanted to acknowledge that there's a lot of, it seems to me, frustration and anger from some of those who are making comments, and I want to know that you are being heard. I also want to provide you with a context in which this information is being put forward. It's not trying to dictate to owners at all, and it's certainly a process that I think has integrity in terms of trying to put options forward and getting feedback from you. Ultimately, you'll have the say. You'll have the say as owners when proposals are put forward for a vote. Tēnā koutou, thank you for listening to me just on that little part. I want to bring in Alex now, please, to talk to the development costs question. So if we can go to the next slide. Alex, are you there?
Yep. Kia ora, thanks, Leo. I suppose some of the themes and the questions asked in the previous 2 hui, and we've answered, I suppose, an overarching question of how much development costs have been incurred to date. We had mentioned in the previous hui that $2.5 million has been spent to date. But what I thought might be helpful for this particular hui is just breaking down a little bit further of what that $2.5 million kind of comprises of. And I've had the team sort of just draft up a little bit of a pie chart, sort of breaking it down. You'll see we've got different areas that we've kind of spent the money on: structure planning, MLC applications, consultancy and legal fees, as well as some sort of smaller projects there: plan change, forest bird appeal, environmental assessments, as well as hui and negotiations. The bigger chunk there, you'll see $1.8 million. Effectively, a lot of that's consultants' costs, sort of moving things forward. But also, just to put things in context as well, the $2.5 million, that goes back as far as 2004. So we're talking about 17, 18 years worth of development costs that have occurred over that sort of period of time. And if you look at that and average it out per year, it works out to be roughly about $140,000 a year that the trust is spending to sort of keep the trust at the table and negotiating and working through options through this development. So hopefully that goes some way to just expanding on that question that's been raised in previous hui. Kia ora, Leo, back over to you.
Tēnā koe, Alex. Kia ora. The next topic is about the Tumu development update. A lot of these initial slides have been provided previously, and so what I'm going to do is ask Jeff Fletcher to give us some details at a high level, please, Jeff, around the infrastructure corridors, in particular the options for how land currently held by the council could come into TK14 ownership by way of exchange. Kia ora, Jeff.
Kia ora, Leo. Tēnā koutou. I'll quickly take you through these next lot of slides, which I did cover in the first two hui, which, as Leo has mentioned, are on the Tumu Kaituna website. But this just gives you a quick update on the development progress, where things are at as we sit today. So this is the Tumu draft structure plan. This plan is now a few years old. This is the plan that Tauranga City Council have developed over the last 5 years, and shows the broad land use pattern for the block and for the wider growth area. And it's this plan that has informed the need for the infrastructure corridors, which we'll come to shortly. So just a brief update on surrounding development. A lot has happened in the last 6-7 years. The Papamore East interchange is now due to commence, subject to final funding later this year, and that will involve some earthworks with completion due in 2025. The Sands Town Centre, which is the area to the north of the interchange and directly adjacent to the Trust block, is due to commence later this year. That's a substantive commercial and residential development, and you'll see there's a YouTube link there. I encourage you to have a look at that, just to give you an indication of scale of what's happening there and the amenities that is proposing. And lastly, a long time coming, is the Rangiora Business Park and earthworks for the interchange onto the Tauranga Eastern Link and the subdivision have commenced, and the buildings are due to commence there within the next 2 years. So the infrastructure corridors, and there's a bit more detail coming on these shortly, are the two main collector roads that will link the development and the infrastructure and transport corridors to the west through Wairake and through to the Papamore East interchange, proposed to go through the Tumu Kaituna 14 block further to the east through the other main land blocks. The names here are not going to be the accurate names, or the names used when they come through your block, but they are names used to the west, so for the purposes of continuity they're used here, and that's the Boulevard, which is the northern collector road, as it says here in purple, and Te Okoroa Drive, which is the southern collector road in blue. So these are the two main corridors, 38 and 37 metres wide approximately, and sandwiched in between those as they come through the block is a proposed active reserve, and that is part of the discussion with you as well, is that it's an active reserve that is proposed for council to take an interest in via a lease or easement for playing fields and public amenities and facilities. So the benefits of the infrastructure corridors and active reserves to the trust are as it enables the plan change to be moved forward with, and in turn enables the trustee guiding principles to begin to be realised. And so it brings important infrastructure into the block, obviously takes it further to the east as well, but it will open up the block for development, for housing, commercial activity, and associated public activities as well. It links the trust block to the wider transport network, including the Papamore East interchange, and it enables government funding opportunities to be realised. And this is a key part of the applications that have been lodged for the housing feasibility, is they need to know that this is an opportunity that can be realised. And last but not least is it enables the provision of long-term income streams through long-term land leases. So the options that have been worked through over the last year, the 7 options have been worked through, and these are detailed here. I've covered these in the previous hui, but I'll quickly run through these, and then we'll go to what is the option that is currently being put in front of you for further discussion. The first option is TCC, and this is picking up on the Carrero from Leo. TCC take an interest in the corridors and the active reserve. They don't purchase them, they don't own them, they take an interest, and that is compensated via the transfer of surplus Tauranga City Council land adjacent to the block, and I'll show you shortly where that land is. The second option is for a pure land exchange along the same lines. The third option is that an interest in the corridors and in the reserve is enabled by easements and financial compensation. So it's another version of option 1 in effect. The fourth option is Maori roadways over the corridors. The fifth option is long-term lease over the corridors, which is up to 52 years, but it has to go through quite a complex process to enable it for that lease to then be registered over a longer term, and that means the land which is not proposed those corridors would need to be converted to general title. The registration takes place and then converted back to Maori freehold land. That's not a preferred option. The sixth option is a long-term lease greater than 52 years, which is extremely difficult to obtain. And then the seventh option is a covenant over those corridors. So out of all those options, the option that the trustees would like to put in front of you is option 1. I won't go through this table in detail. It's on the previous slideshows on the website. It's on this one, but it just covers off the pros and cons of each option. But I won't take you through this right now, but please have a look at this. It helps understand the process that has been gone through to work through to the preferred option. So as part of the first 2 hui, there were some very good questions asked, and we've put a few of these on this slide just so you can understand the discussion that's happened to date if you haven't been part of it. So the first question was, will the exchange of land interests be in favour of the owners? The answer to that was, if this is the preferred option, the trustees are committed to negotiating the best outcome for the owners, and we'll talk shortly about valuation expertise in this context. The second question is, will any exchange land be held as general land or Maori freehold land? The answer to that is the law requires that exchange land be held as Maori freehold land. However, there are exceptions. So any feedback on this is obviously would be welcomed. So I'll just take you through option 1, which is the preferred option of the trustees to take forward and to get your feedback on. So as Leo mentioned, the objective here is TCC, or Tauranga City Council, takes an interest in these infrastructure corridors and in the active reserve, and in compensation for that interest, and that interest reiterating is not selling the land, it's the interest to be able to put infrastructure on it and use the land for either infrastructure or for playing fields in the case of the active reserve, is compensated for by surplus Tauranga City Council land adjacent to the whenua. Based on the feedback received to date, the trustees believe this is the best outcome, both in the short, medium and long term. The benefits are it retains the underlying land ownership with the trust. It increases the trust's land ownership by approximately 17 hectares of what is currently commercially zoned land. It enables the Tumu plan change and in turn the trustee guiding principles to be achieved. It provides required infrastructure for the trust to provide for housing and commercial development. It links the trust through to the wider transportation network, and it enables government funding opportunities to be realised. And lastly, as a medium and long-term outcome, it allows for significant income streams through long-term land leases. So taking you through to some information on the surplus land that we're talking about, this slide shows you the block, the whenua, the Tumu Kaituna 14 block, and the location of what we're calling the surplus lands, which is on this slide shown as the PEI, or the Papamoa East Interchange land holdings. And this is the land that council had to purchase in order to enable the Papamoa East Interchange to be designated and in turn to be built shortly. So there's 2 parcels within that blue area. Both the parcels combined are approximately 17 hectares of commercially zoned land. So it's zoned land. It can be built on as we talk today. The infrastructure corridors on the trust land on the whenua are approximately 10 hectares, and the active reserve is approximately 20 hectares. This slide shows a bit more detail of where that surplus land is. You can see to the bottom of the slide the Torrong Eastern Link and the proposed Papamoa East Interchange. So it's directly adjacent not only to the Tumu Kaituna 14 block, but to the motorway, to the Torrong Eastern Link, and to the Papamoa East Interchange. And it has access into these blocks directly off Te Akaroa Drive. It's commercially zoned land. It's zoned under the operative Tauranga City Plan. This slide shows you a bigger version of that, and you can see here the detail of the Torrong Eastern Link, the connection through to Te Akaroa Drive, and Te Akaroa Drive connecting to the top of the page, to the top right of the page, into the Tumu Kaituna 14 block. So we've had discussions with Tauranga City Council on this, and as Leo mentioned, they have been working actively to find ways to engage with the trustees and in turn with yourselves, the owners, on how this can occur. Their undertaking that they've given to the trustees is that those surplus lands will be held in consideration of an exchange of interest for the infrastructure corridors. So they have the option to put those on the open market today, but they've undertaken to hold that land in this consideration, and with the ability to get feedback from yourselves, and in turn to engage further with the trustees, the owners of Tumu Kaituna 14 block. They have undertaken to engage with mana whenua to ensure that any cultural matters associated with that surplus land have been appropriately identified and considered. That process is just commencing as we speak. So they're conscious that they need to firstly engage with mana whenua in the area to ensure that there's no cultural matters that may create an issue for this proposal should it proceed. So the next steps, Tauranga City Council are engaging with mana whenua on this land, and that process, as I said, is just commencing. The trustees are engaging with yourselves as the owners of the block to get feedback ahead of resolutions being prepared, and we strongly encourage feedback to come through on this proposal. And lastly, just circling back to the commitment by the trustees to get the best possible outcome, is the trustees have secured the services of a land valuation expert who's experienced in Maori freehold land valuation and compensation, and together with Leo's expertise, we've got a very strong team to negotiate the best possible outcome and to put the owner's interests first and foremost in negotiating a proposal, should it be decided that this is a proposal to proceed with.
I'll just stay there, Jeff, on that slide. Thanks for that, and thanks for your presentation. So just picking up on some of the points again, in trying to capture the cordial that's coming through on the chat. This is very clearly being put forward to you as options. All of this depends on whether the owners see benefit in opening up the block to your development and the range of possibilities that are there for your housing and commercial needs and the like. The quid pro quo on opening up the block and making that a goer in terms of some of the trustee principles is that the council is seeking access by way of these infrastructure corridors. If the owners felt that that was an important quid pro quo, then council access to those corridors for the benefit of the public would be compensated by presumably a package of money and land. And by that I mean the trustees are looking to land that is adjacent to your block. Jeff set this out, commercial land able to be built on, provide appropriate income streams in the future. There's a lot of work that would go in to see whether that's even feasible, whether the valuation stacks up. It looks in principle like it could be a really suitable area of land to add to your existing land. But none of this is being undertaken beyond any sketch of the details, unless the owners have enough information before them to make a decision as to whether that's appropriate or not. And we've got to get to a level of detail to give you some sense of what might be feasible, without then also at all suggesting that the thing is a done deal. I just wanted to pick up on one of the questions I thought was really important too, around ensuring that the land that is proposed by the council is itself not tinged or tainted with some of the raupatu and the other nukuroa activities that council and government agencies have done over many decades. So in other words, the idea of making sure that the land that's being put forward as a suggested exchange and the surplus land to come into TK14 ownership, that we've really carefully considered where that land come from and make sure that we're not heaping a hara upon another hara. So thanks for that comment. One of the important aspects for the trustees that I've heard from them is that they want to be fully engaged with the mana whenua of those blocks of land, whoever they may be, and that process has started to open up that corridor, and not for the trust to be caught in the middle of council engaging with various Māori parties. So in 2022, that's not the way we operate. We've got to have the trustees, on behalf of you, right in the middle of the engagement with other mana whenua parties to deal with that very point that one of the owners has just raised. So tēnā koe. I just note also that Jeff had indicated that there's a disparity in the sizes of the areas. So the infrastructure corridors that the council are looking at total about 30 hectares of your land. That's the active reserves, which is the playgrounds and the sports fields, and it's the two main roads through the land. In contrast, of course, the land that's been at least tabled by the council for consideration at this stage is about 17 hectares. Now, just remember that, as I said before, we're talking about easements and leases over your land, not the sale. But nevertheless, issues like that are really important to see whether there's going to be parity between the blocks. And sometimes the valuation methodology can favour one side or the other side. So we need to have a really strong team of experts to make sure that when we are considering a valuation methodology, we're getting the very, very best outcome for the owners. And that might include land, for instance, plus financial compensation. So there's a lot of water to go under that bridge, but it was a useful summary from you, Jeff. I note that some are asking around the detail that's in the slides, and it is sometimes hard to find a balance of how much to put in and how much to leave out. Please do go back through these slides that are going to be on the website so that you can drill in, but ask us questions, send feedback through, and if you want more information, then we're here to provide that. Can I ask now that we just have a 5-minute break? We're going to reconvene at 11:30, and the reason for that is we've got a couple of other topics to discuss: council rates and a development of the online survey. But importantly, also we're giving time for owners to speak. We've got some requests there that have come through. So if we have a break now, then when we reconvene at 11:30, we'll have the energy to be able to deal with the final steps in this engagement process. So I'm just going to call a break now from 11:25, and we reconvene in 5 minutes. Tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou. I hope that break was well used. I just want to acknowledge the trustees who have been listening to this and a lot of the information that's been presented. Also some of the feedback that's coming through. So I thought it would be useful when we start up now the second half to open the floor to you trustees. If there's any comments you want to make, making sure that I'm giving the right information, correcting me, the floor is yours just to add your whakaaro before we move on with the presentations. Tēnā koutou.
Georgina, we'll look to bring you in first. Be with us is relatively new approach. I'm just allowing you to talk now.
Sorry, Alex, hold on. I'm just inviting the trustees to make any comment, and we're going to go to owners speaking shortly. So just thumbs up, really, because I'm away from you physically, whether we're going okay, and if there's anything you'd like to add to the kōrero now, feel free to do so, trustees.
I'll wait for after Georgina.
Kia ora koutou. I just looked at one of the comments that have come through, and it's related to the fact that whatever housing proposal goes forward, there's some real fear about what the actual cost still is in place to get through the door, to cross the threshold of a new place, and then the ongoing costs after that. And I think that's something as not only trustees, but also yourselves, we have to think really hard, what's the best way to make it economically feasible for those who want to live there? And then the other thing to think hard about too is for people to consider how long they would want to be there. So it's good to see that some of the comments are digging down into those sort of details. But then, having said that, of course, housing is on the table at the moment, but it may not necessarily be the outcome. All right, kia ora.
Kia ora. Okay. Any other trustees before we carry on?
No.
You'll be able to participate during the hui. All right. So I'm going to go to.
Excuse me, Leo.
I think I do just have something, Leo. I'd just like to acknowledge that you've captured the essence of what we as trustees have spoken about, and without, because I will admit that I'm very iwi-centric, but without putting anything on it, you've gone and captured it. You've put the message out to them well. So kia ora.
Leo, we've listened from here. And we understand it, but we feel sorry for those ones that are out there who are still contemplating whether it's going to be valuable for them or whatever. I think, just feeling for those people who because when you rattle off some of those things, it's all right for this caliber, but to them, I think they've got a lot of questions still to ask for long term and way into the future. So I think we've got to allow them to come before us and before some of the ones who've spoken so far, so they can ask questions around that.
Kia ora, Waratau. All right, so let's do that, and you're right. There's owners, tēnā koutou, there is a lot of information we realise, and the idea of engaging through these hui is to try and let it. I think one of the phrases on your comments was "let it settle," and we really need to respect that and provide time for your feedback to come through. I think the other theme that I'm seeing also is a sense that there may well be a whole range of other options for the use of the land that don't result or don't benefit from the Tumu development. And I just want to encourage owners to be thinking through those and putting them forward. The trustees I know have been actively considering options for the development of the whenua, and this was seen as the best model to try and meet your owner objectives, i.e. how do you actually get housing onto the land? How do you get commercial sustainable income for those who won't be able to live on the land? You know, you've got many hundreds of owners in the block. So it's a matter of providing a vision that can meet all of the needs of the owners to a greater extent possible. And so some of the responses that have come through to be diametrically opposed to any of this proposal that's put forward. I just want to invite those who are opposed completely to be thinking about what is the vision you have for the mokopuna in those generations to come, and to be able to feed back through this process and give those ideas. One of the suggestions, of course, that I've heard is that there might be a more limited development, that we can do it in a staged way. And I like those whakaaro coming forward, because of course this is just the first threshold of saying, is this something that the owners wish to participate in? And if so, then it seems to me that there's a whole series of kōrero and engagement that needs to happen after that about how you're actually going to achieve that. So I do see this as a good fresh start, but it's step one in that process, and a lot of kōrero is yet to come about the details. People have talked about aged care facilities, retirement homes. Those sort of ideas, I think, are really important as they're coming forward, and we've tried to incorporate some of that into the presentation. All right, so there is going to be just a reordering here, Alex. We're just going to bring the owners' speaking time up. So what happened, whānau, is that we were concerned, I guess, that the first two engagement hui were being you were participating by way of listening and then through chat and question and answer functions. And we know that that's not the key preference in terms of engaging. Kanohi is the preference, but also hearing you speak. And it was just a matter of finding the way in which we could find that balance. So for this hui, we sent out a pānui and invited registration of those who wish to note that they would want some speaking time. Georgina, you had Georgina Fata had sought some speaking time, and we're making that available to you today. Others have sought that as part of the chat function. So on my list, I've got Renee would like to speak, and Arthur. I'm just going to regulate this. I'm going to invite you to speak, where we'll call out the name. Our technicians will unmute you, and you'll be able to kōrero and speak. Can I ask this, though, that we want to ensure that you are heard, but we also want to ensure that the kōrero is constructive and focused on the issues. So I can just indicate that as chair, I won't be tolerating personal attacks on trustees, and I won't be expecting the trustees to respond in a personal way either. It is really important that we focus our kōrero on the issues and on the future. So please do respect the protocols of the hui. I'm not proposing to put a speaking limit in terms of time. We tend to ask about a 3-minute time is standard for hui and for other public gatherings, but also I need to be a bit flexible about that. So I'm going to just check that we're okay with our tech people. If they could let Georgina Fata please speak to us. And Georgina, tēnā koe, the floor is yours.
Kia ora whānau. Thank you for the time today. Although I was a little bit surprised that I was elevated to the front of the line, but hey, hoi anō. Kei te pai. So look, all the way through, our whānau have been really concerned about the speed in which this whole process has kind of taken off. The proposal that has been put to us is a proposal that is the same proposal in a slightly different shape and form over the years, but has been just put to us consistently and persistently for a number of years. And it's only now that we've been given that opportunity to have a say about any of it. And it just seems that now that in the last 3 months, it's just one hui after another and the same korero around the proposal being put to us. And so when you have that coming at you persistently and consistently, you kind of start feeling like you're not being heard. Now, Leo, I do appreciate, I do want to acknowledge that your facilitation has just been outstanding. So I know, and I do appreciate that. You bring that element to the korero, which keeps it quite structured, which I appreciate. I just wanted to acknowledge that. In terms of where we've come from, and there's probably 3 things I want to talk to here. One is around the elections for the trustees. Appreciate that, you know, there's a process in place. I know that through our participation in AGMs and just general korero around the trustees, there has been historically a lack of, you know, genuine engagement, genuine response to us, and even the ability to be heard and acknowledged by the trustees that we have been heard. And that hasn't changed even through this process. Notwithstanding we have a facilitator, a lot of the korero is not coming from the trustees but through the facilitator. And I get that that's a process. But it kind of has put a barrier now between that directness. It's complicated by COVID because we're not kanohi ki kanohi, and I'm sure if we were, that directness would be addressed differently. We are where we are. So when it comes to the trustee elections, our preference is that we have a fresh start. You're asking us to have a fresh start with a proposal. I'm asking the same with the trustees. And I've mentioned this in earlier korero around bringing in the next generation, bringing in new, fresh ideas. Don't overcomplicate the process of elections and who is entitled to be elected. That process is not new to us. It's already well established. So some of the korero I heard earlier today, it just blew my mind. So my feedback on that is keep it simple. Elections are not new to us as a people. So that's the election side. The proposal side, I'm still banging on, and I will continue to bang on about not using our whenua as the source of infrastructure for a class of people outside the beneficial owners of the Tumu Kaituna 14. We start every hui with the history of our land. We go through a process of engagement, and we're being asked to ignore that history, ignore that we have this whenua, and swap it for someone else's land. Unacceptable. That's a bottom line for me. I just find that abhorrent. In terms of the options, I get, yes. Leo, you're right. I mean, if we want something different, we need to put those options to the trustees to consider. Again, I'm going to go back to the timing. People need time to consider options, and you will only get the broad engagement of alternative options with reference to individual owners' own environment and experiences. So for me, what would be useful is that we have an owner engagement opportunity where we can just discuss openly what options could look like. You know, we've got this engagement about a particular process and a proposal from the trustees. I'm suggesting, why don't we have separate hui for our owners where we can just talk about other options, of which not opening up the whenua for infrastructure might be one of them, but an alternative option to that might be something else. So then we get a broader and more inclusive, response. I just feel that, you know, pushing a timeline when you're only given a very structured and defined framework can really limit people's ability to think beyond that proposal, because all we've seen is the proposal that's put to us as from the trustees. So that would be the other point I'd like to make, is that can we please have an opportunity for owners to put forward alternative options other than the proposal, and do that in a group fashion. So then we get that collective inclusiveness.
Thank you, Georgina.
Kia ora, kumatu.
Tēnā koe. Thank you for your contribution, and I really appreciate the constructive way that you set out those comments, so thank you. We heard from you about the feeling that you haven't been heard in the past. You acknowledge, of course, that these hui are not the best, but we're trying to do our best in that regard, but we certainly hear that. On trustee elections, don't overcomplicate the process, and that you're familiar with trustee elections, so I certainly take that point on. In terms of drafting the rules for how to be nominated, we do have to make sure that the lawyers don't get ahead of the pack. So I'll be listening carefully to the feedback and making sure that the draft of the trust order is simple and clear and user friendly. Absolutely. You've also made it clear right through your comments that you prefer a fresh start of all of the trustees. I've tried to respond as to how the trustees see that, and your comments are really noted and well received. In terms of the proposal, you don't agree with it in terms of the use of your whenua for the benefit of others. I think some of the key themes that the trustees have been putting forward is that there is a quid pro quo, because in making some of your land available for the benefit of others, you open up the whole of your land to try and achieve some of your objectives. And that brings us to your last point of what are some other alternatives. So thank you for your comments about providing an opportunity where owners can discuss amongst yourselves for those other opportunities or alternative options to come forward. Timing is an issue. We would love more time for everything, and we need to try and find that balance, because of course the current development is being proposed right on your doorstep. However, I've heard that clearly, and we're going to take the feedback into account as to how to make sure owners can participate by way of providing alternative options, not just responding to the options that are being put forward today. Nō reira, tēnā koe. I'm going to ask if our technician can move to Renee Kiriona, if you can unlock her mute, please. Tēnā koe, Renee, can you hear us?
Tēnā koutou, pai te rongo?
Kei te pai.
Aye. Kia ora koutou, kia ora to you trustees. Wow, the past 3 years has been like a roller coaster for both sides, I think. We've fought each other in the court, fought each other in the media, fought each other on social media, and on the Kumaravine. There is clearly a significant number of owners who are upset. And I absolutely agree with the trustees when they say there needs to be a refresh. However, in order to be a refresh, there needs to be a reset. And what I would like to propose, I know we have no legal grounds at present to ask for this, but if we adopt some of our tikanga Māori here, my mum has asked me to come to this hui today and to put this tono down. I'm not expecting an answer in the hui or from you trustees just yet. And her whakaaro is this. Trustees, stand down. If the owners want you back, they will re-elect you back. Stand down. If you want to stand up again, put your name in the hat and leave it up to the owners. And I know that that's actually a really hard thing. I'm on a couple of little trusts, and if the beneficiaries owners asked me to do such a thing, it would most probably break my heart to a certain point. But at the same time, I think the most important thing for a trustee is to listen to their people. What is the use of being there if there are significant numbers of your people who don't want you there? And I'm not saying that they don't want you there, but there's been a lot of things that have happened over the past 3 years. And so we're at this point now, and it's the whakaaro of my family that testing our mana is a positive thing. So I agree with Georgina's point. Stand down, put your names back in the hat again. If your people, and that's us, and I know sometimes it it's nice to think that, geez, these are the people I represent, but yes, we are. If we want you back on there, you'll get on there. And then we can go through all of these wānanga, all of these alternatives, all of this kōrero. I do appreciate the mahi you've put into this presentation. I can see there are some aspects of what we've said in the past that you are responding to. But I think for your sake, for our sake, yeah, let's reset. Let's go there. Ka pai koutou. Kia ora.
Tēnā koe. E te tuahine, me tō kōrero, that message has come through clearly. Kia ora. You did say that the tono was being laid down and you didn't want a response or expect a response today. I can just say that your kōrero on that and also around the proposals that have come through in your feedback have really been heard and taken into account. Okay, so tēnā koe. And so can I ask Arthur, if you're there, if our tech can turn Arthur's mute off, please. Tēnā koe Matua, can you hear us?
Kia ora, Arthur, you there?
Arthur, you had asked for just a chance to talk. Can you speak into the mic? So what I'm going to do is get Arthur to just note in the chat if there was a technical issue there, Arthur. Just put it in the chat and we'll try to sort that out. Perhaps if you're not online anymore and you would like to participate at the next hui, by way of speaking, please let us know and we'll make that time available.
Kia ora, Leo.
No. Kia ora, Arthur.
Is that you, Arthur? Kia ora.
I found a little button I had to push. It said unmute.
E te pai.
Nā mihi, Leo, mō te tuku kōrero i au ki a koutou mō tēnei kaupapa. My kōrero is not so much about the detail of the development on the block, but the broader concerns which I believe should be considered at this stage of consultation and while considering resolutions. But firstly, we're not in favour of the trust policies on the eligibility criteria of a term of Māori whenua governance experience to be a trustee. As with the qualification criteria that was removed before, the policy is exclusionary and subjects the trust to the potential to retain the status quo, rather than allowing owners to nominate and choose trustees based on what they can offer the trust and the whenua moving forward. The very existence of such draconian policies adds to the resolve and coercive nature of which this trust has endeavoured to drive its development policy for our whenua in its present form. Some trustees, we believe, have simply become blinded by their determination to open up to Tumu, that they have lost sight of the broader implications in their kaitiaki responsibilities. The late Moana Jackson's legacy is a reminder that colonisation has not stopped. We can expect Crown agencies to be very much in favour of and encourage and support the opening up of our whenua with the age-old sweetener of the social and housing benefits it will offer the owners. It is not hard to find whenua Māori that came up against urban sprawl who made decisions with the vision of the good who would offer their whānau, to eventually find themselves subject and tangled in resource management and urban planning rules that quickly saw the cultural landscape of their whānau swallowed by urban intensification. So it is important that a trustee has a degree in environmental planning or environmental policies or environmental law, because these regulations matter now and going forward. Your planners are talking about plan changes, zoning and easements and land use rules as a sweetener, distracting you from where the Maori land tenure system and our customary rights sit in the context of this proposal. Over the last two consultations, Zui, I have persistently asked about the Ford Block's plans for their whenua. Why? Because they are landlocked, and opening up to Tumu unlocks the Ford's plans for development. What are they? We do not know. It is still being drafted. Why does this matter? Because despite the colonialist land tenure system and their ideas of owners' land rights, we are mana whenua, and we lose our customary rights when we stop asserting them. what Ford do on their block will impact Te Tumu and Makatu significantly, and it will matter to us. The 4-block development the council has marked is looking at a population intensification of 25,000 to 35,000 people, and the surface paradise opportunity of that block will see us defending the modi of our awa and the surrounding taiao. I have that degree in environmental planning, and my responsibility, as my friend Moana told me, is to defend, protect and restore our mana as kaitiaki o te taiao. I submit that the Trust does not consent to an easement on the road which supplies access to the 4-block, and the opening up to Tumu or public access is contingent upon 1, the ability to remove that easement by the Trust, 2, the establishment of customary rights along the entire coastline in accordance with the Marine and Coastal Area Takutai Moana Act 2011 to provide us with legislative authority over that coastline. And 3, there be a meaningful tangata whenua representation on the development and management body of the 4-block. We know that it is not who owns the whenua that has weight, but who controls. This requires the Trust to have kaha, Maya nui and mātauranga hou. We as mana whenua are kaitiaki of not just the block, but the area and the historic evidence of Pākehā and council ability to protect the modi of our mātua awa, takutai moana, mahinga mātaitai and tangata whenua has a track record of incompetence and treaty breaches. We as owners are positioned now to play a large role as mana whenua and not just landowners. Ko ea taku whakaaro, nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Alex, tēnā koe. Arthur, sorry, tēnā koe. I'm glad you were able to find the unmute, because that contribution was very important. I just wonder, you obviously had that prepared. Would you be able to, or be interested in providing that in writing through to us? I think it would be useful for us to be able to put that up on the website too. Matua, tēnā koe. Thank you for those comments. There is a request from Te Ohu, I think, Alex, to have speaking rights, and then I'm going to close that part off and move into the balance of the presentation. I know that everyone has got a valuable time and are giving it up on the Saturday morning, so we have to keep things moving. Alex, can I, or the tech team, is Te Ohu there? Can you come in there, tēnā koe?
Kia ora, Georgina, I think.
Kia ora koutou.
Oh, there we go.
Tēnā koe Leo, he mi atu ki a koe, e nā te pau whakahaere o tēnei hui, nō reira a kāneta mi. Kia koutou hoki ana te tēpu, e nā te pāpa te whakapai tēnei hui, nō reira e te whānau a tēnā koutou katoa. Just the 3 aspects I just want to bring up. I've known this Karakia since 2004, same time as Malcolm. I'm in Sim B1 and I'm also in this one, Sim 14. So I just want to talk about 3 aspects, which is critical to today and going forward. In 2006, we took Judge Karen Wycliffe to the whenua. Her comment was, who the hell would give this away? We got it back. It's only 8 acres, but we got it back. We're next door. Toi te kupu. Toi te mana, toi te whenua. Taku whanaunga, Aue Nuku just spoke about our pūraka. I don't want to ever lose that. Only by taking the people to the whenua, the mindset falls back into our tūpuna. So for 7B1, we'd like to ask all our people that no resolutions take place until all, as many as the owners, have revisited the site. It's a wonderment, that site. The fear for me is universal conformity. We get smashed by it. Universal conformity is how councils operate, and they broadcast the next 30 years of our future with how much they get off each and every one of us, all those people, those tau iwi who are not party to our whenua. A big income stream is laid up in that universal conformity. So, Leo, I take heart and your presence in presenting all of this. But only when you go to the whenua do people's minds go back to our tūpuna. And what a beautiful coastline we have. forevermore, moa ke tonu atu, things take time. What's another 100 years? But the good thing about it, to all the trustees, let our people be the sole decision of our future. No reira, he bi atu ki a koe e leo, ki a koutou hoki ana te tēpū, a whanaunga, a tēnā koutou katoa. Kasi. Kia ora.
Tēnā koe tau, ngami.
Kia ora.
Again, hearing your kōrero there, in particular around the importance of revisiting and reconnecting physically to the whenua. So just want to note again that a site visit is being planned, and I think that's a really important reminder for us about that. So tēnā koe. And I think a kia tūpato from you about the way in which councils operate and making sure, as you say, this sense of universal conformity doesn't mean that you as owners end up rolled over by the needs of the majority community. And I can hear that clearly. Both you and also Arthur spoke about the importance of the coastline. Malcolm at an earlier hui had indicated that in terms of the customary marine title claims, there had been no competing claims put along the front of your block there by others. I'm not sure exactly where things sit with the marine title rules, but of course I'm well familiar with the legislation in other areas, and I can say that it's akin to raupatu in my opinion anyway, because the customary marine title sounds good, but it doesn't necessarily deliver true mana motuhake in terms of tikanga. So it's a good reminder from you both, Arthur and Tohu, about the importance of that coast. And also both of you brought in the wider perspective of the Māori land blocks and the coastline that is beyond just the Tumu Kaituna 14 block, and the importance of involving neighbouring land blocks in there as well. So, kei te miha te kia koe, me tō whānau, me tō kōrero. Kia ora. Thank you to the owners for participating there. We'll do that again at the next hui and make sure that you give owner speaking time. Alex, I'm going to just ask you, or whoever's running the slides, to bring us up to the slides around the rates. And just in the interest of time, I'm just going to quickly summarise this here, whānau. I said to you that there were questions raised by rates at the earlier hui, and we felt it was important to report on that. There is a rates postponement agreement in place with Tauranga City Council. And so this is a historical agreement where you get 50% of the rates postponed every year. We understand that the current liability is at $71,000 approximately. Now, having been involved just in the last little while, I think that it's important for me to be able to add some contribution to the trust here, certainly in the weeks ahead, around engaging with the council on rates, because the rating rules have changed. The Rating Act has been amended, and especially rating policies that local authorities need to have in place to take into account the vagaries of multiple ownership of Māori land. But that's I think underway, and it's important to do that. But we note that there has been a rating revaluation that's taken place by the council, and if you just look at the next slide, you'll see how out of whack this actually is. So in 2018, they actually valued your block at 84 million, and then the trustees objected on your behalf and had the overall rating valuation brought down to just over 8 million, a 90% reduction. And this really goes to how the methodology of rating valuations are not cognizant of Māori land issues, but also, well done to the trustees for being proactive in that regard. The thing has happened again, though. In 2021, there's been a revaluation of your block. It happens every 3 years through your rohe, with a council suggestion of $194 million asset value. And that's again been objected, and the request is that it get brought down to the 2018 valuation, which is being under review now by the council. So as I understand it, there hasn't been a decision made by the council yet on that request. What I'm saying is that regardless of this particular exercise, which is important to go through, I think there needs to be a review and a reset with the council around rating generally. rating and their policies on Māori land currently, including rates for emissions, but also making sure that rates in the future don't fall disproportionately on whānau who are seeking to live back on the land with their houses. And I'm pleased to say that finally some of the changes that we've been asking for years in terms of how to rate papakainga have come through the legislation. So that's a whole work stream that needs to be picked up and developed with the council to make sure that you're not overly penalised in terms of what is essentially a local tax. Kia ora. We can go to the online survey page. Uanuku, I thought it might be useful if you just wanted to give your kōrero here around the survey and why you think it's important that owners participate in that survey as another vehicle for hearing from them.
Kia ora koutou. Just to start off with Georgina and Renee, I need to think about the challenge you put forward to us as trustees. I'm glad we don't have to answer just yet. I will mull over it. And here is another way that we can get feedback that's not tied to when the next AGM is or the next engagement hui with you. It's a way to engage all the time. The questions were put together to cover the matters that were in this current undertaking. And I have to me mihi au kia waratau because he, when he saw the questions, he sent an email out that says, I understand that almost every beneficiary is a Māori, but all the questions are in English. So thanks to his challenge, then I got given the job of turning them into Māori. So I'm really hopeful that some of you will actually even respond to some of the questions in Māori. There's, the title is Whakaputaina o Whakaaro, and it's been good hearing some of the direct feedback from the speakers today. Lots to think about, and also about a lot of the personal concerns that I have and other trustees have. But this survey system is a way to try to keep taking those snapshots of where you're at in the way that you're thinking about what we're doing and what needs to be done for the whenua. And so you see in English, have your say. It doesn't take long to do. But just as Leo asked you, Arthur, the thing that you spoke to today, it's sort of material like that can come in and be put alongside these sort of surveys so a lot of people start thinking about the issues that you've brought up. I'm sure that these things will, the online survey will be added to over time, or a new set of questions come up as needs arise. So please take your time to fill it out. It doesn't, like most surveys, it's only an indication though, when we can't be bound by those who have got enough energy to fill it out. We need to make sure that we expand it. So this is another personal plea to you. We've got 48, Amber, people engaged in this meeting at the moment. 43. Oh, 43. Okay, 5 of you got bored with what we were saying. But you need to get the word out to all your relations. I know that a lot of us have died. Some of us are knocking on its door. But for those that are alive, get the message out there and make sure that it's happening at the hapu forums that you have. And please send them in the direction of the online survey. And also, if they can get their details into us so they're getting the notices, so we can take that huge number of, what is it now, Amber? Is it still 43? Good, you haven't got bored with me yet. That we can have the next meeting with a lot more people engaged. Nō reira, koena tāku I tēnei wā. Whakaputaina o koutou whakaaro. Tēnā koutou.
Kia ora unuku. We just go to the next topic now, which is how voting might go. Now, I just want to preface this with saying that when I start talking about voting procedures, you're obviously those who are objecting to the proposals will ask, why would we vote on something when we don't agree with the proposals at all? We're putting the cart before the horse. So this slide is looking at how owners might ultimately be asked to make a decision on this. And it's not to alienate you further in terms of those who are objecting, feeling that those concerns haven't been heard. The trustees here, of course, are representing the many hundreds of owners as well who have interests in the block. And so there has to be a balance here between how the proposals that they're putting forward are engaging with the other owners and seeing what they feel about this. I'm going to be taking back this feedback to the trustees as part of a debrief about what the next steps should be. In particular, I was, I think, moved by the comments from Georgina around alternative options and trying to find a forum whereby those options can be put forward and discussed. I think the trustees would not want to be closed to hearing how other alternative options, or even a hybrid mix of what's being proposed here, could advance owner aspirations. Because it seems to me, having been with you all for a short period of time, you're all actually on the same page around what you want for the future in terms of the high level aspirations. And really it's a matter of ensuring that we find ways in which you can engage with how those options, how those aspirations might be met by other options as well. Nevertheless, as part of this presentation, and regardless of the option that's been discussed, we're putting forward ideas on how a decision could be made by owners in due course. So far it's been feedback and engagement, but shortly we'd have to move into a decision-making framework. And the reason for that, Whānau, is because if there are development opportunities as there are around your block, the trustees have an obligation also to make sure that they are bringing the owners into a decision-making framework in a timely enough manner that those opportunities aren't lost. So it may be that owners just say no, but it's also important for you to understand that the trustees have an obligation to bring these types of options to you while the options are still actually alive and able to be taken up. The suggestion there is a voting process whereby one vote for each registered owner would be cast, but that also the owner and their vote would be recorded by way of what we call the poll vote. So we get an indication both of the numbers of owners participating, and we also get an indication of the threshold of support by way of shares. I think that's a sensible way forward. It will certainly assist all of you to have a sense of where those who hold a significant number of shares feel the land should go. But also it makes sure that those who hold a tiny number of shares have a valued voice in the room. And that's not to penalise those who, through the fragmentation of land interests, you end up with a small share in multiple owned block, because of course it's your whenua too, regardless of the shares that you hold. In terms of expressing that vote, the suggestion is that there be a combination of postal voting and electronic voting. By that we mean there would be a series of resolutions that would be crafted with you and through the next phase of engagement. Whatever those resolutions may be, they would go out by way of postal voting papers, but also allowing those who receive those postal voting papers to participate and cast their vote electronically. There is a cost associated with the electronic voting mechanisms. However, the trustees take the view that that is an appropriate expenditure to make sure that those who own shares are able to participate effectively and efficiently as well. The postal system here, of course, is getting slower and slower. The ability to send documentation out, alerting owners to a postal vote, then alerting them to, or providing the postal sheet itself, the voting sheet, and then having that come back again to the trust takes a long time. We feel it would be really beneficial for people to receive information and be able to vote online within a certain time frame without necessarily having to post something physically into a post box. However, we realise also that there will be a number of kaumātua and kuia in particular for whom an electronic means of voting may not be suitable, and so we have to provide both of those options. So can I go to the next slide, please? We want feedback on all of this. in terms of the proposals for the voting. In particular, we're looking at the next steps whereby this presentation, along with the others, would all be posted up on the website. Should I just note for Patty, I think Patty Sutton, I just responded to you on chat. You had put forward a comprehensive series of questions. I had understood that, well, certainly we've participated in answering all those. So we just need to pick up on the technology as to where those answers have gone to, but they will be provided back to you and also put on the website. So tēnā koe, Patty, for your contribution, and others who have put questions forward too. We're going to engage with you around the feedback. We need to go into a huddle after this hui around some of the suggestions that have been put forward by Georgina and others as well. So it's going to be an iterative process where we come back with some options for further engagement. And then we're looking really to bring resolutions back to a further engagement hui, along with, I had anticipated some draft clauses of the new trust order, so that you could actually see and participate in providing feedback on this. So we've heard comments about making it simple, don't overcomplicate things, don't put up barriers. I think, Arthur, you were mentioning that were exclusionary or preserve the status quo in terms of how to be a trustee, the nomination thresholds. All of that is really important feedback. At that next hui, therefore, we'll be looking at the future direction and getting an idea of whether it's time to move into a decision-making framework. In the meantime, as just as an off-the-cuff suggestion, for those who are asking for more time and for owners to be able to engage in an opportunity for that, I'd also like you to be suggesting to us how you feel you would like to engage in that way. I think that a series of perhaps some workshops might be useful. I've done this with another group recently, and it's worked well, whereby I've been available if need be, or it may be just without me at all, to allow, by way of Zoom, workshops where owners can come on in a registration way and have a kōrero about how they see the future of the block. It can be useful to have that facilitated because there will be a number of different views. So my suggestion, just here without even asking the trustees, is that we might look at a series of smaller workshops over the next couple of weeks, whereby owners can participate and share their views as well. Anyway, it's food for thought, and we'll give some thought as to how to best do this for you. Once all that has happened, we'll move into the decision-making framework. I don't have a time frame for that at the moment. I think it's best that we pause, we listen to the kōrero that's happened today, and take stock from there. In terms of the trustee elections for the vacant positions, I have indicated that the trustees want to move ahead with filling the 2 vacant positions shortly, and they'll be making plans for that. So when we report back to you, I think we'll have clearer details around the timing and the process for those 2 vacant positions that are available now. Okay, I just want to check, Alex, through you, please. I haven't been able to participate in reading all of the chat. If there are things that are of importance that you wish to speak to, please do let me know. I know that the various question and answers, we've tried to respond as well as we can. Nyreen, there's a question there that you've asked us about. You feel that the owner concerns are falling on deaf ears. I really hear your feedback and concerns that you've expressed. You did note that the trustees should execute the direction from the court to replace the trustees. Just as a matter of clarity, there is no direction from the court to replace all the trustees. And as Renee had indicated, there's not a legal basis for that. However, you and others have expressed a preference for there to be a refresh of all the trustees, and your tono in that regard has been tabled and has been heard. Nō reira, tēnā koe. Alex, help me here. I think I'm going to suggest that we close the hui shortly. Can I just ask you to tell me if that's okay, or if there are other outstanding matters you want me to address?
Thanks, Leo. No, I think in terms of the Q&A panel, that's probably the last one that's really needed to be answered. I was just trying to understand, it's probably one of the chat function from Georgina. She's gone through and had a look at the survey questions. And I think there's a bit of concern, if I'm gauging this right from Georgina, that this is similar to the survey that was run a number of years ago and could potentially be used in litigation or within the courts. I'll probably say this, and you can probably add on to this too, Leo. The survey's there for us to sort of gauge the feeling from a number of owners, and I think it's been brought up. I mean, today we've had 40 to 48 sort of owners engaging in the hui today. The first one we've had about 80, so we've had different levels of engagement at these types of hui. Having the survey there really casts a net a lot wider to owners that ain't or haven't been able to attend these hui or get onto the website, but do want to provide some input. We have to remember there's over 5,200 owners in the block. We don't have all of their details where we can email them and sort of engage with them. We would hope that you as owners would pass the message on to whānau members who haven't updated their details with the share registry team. But the survey is probably just trying to cast that net wide to get the most input from all the owners.
Kia ora, Leah. Kia ora koutou katoa. I think, just picking up on what Georgina said, I think some of you might feel, oh, here we go, here's another top-down sort of approach that, we've come up with the questions. The last question is a chance to put up a chance for you to put in what you think should be asked to, so that we make sure it's not just coming from the table of the trustees as to what's going to be asked. If there's other questions that you think are important that need to be put in there, then the next time the next iteration of the survey can include those questions. And I think, Leo, I hope you don't mind, but I'm even thinking with those workshops that some of the topics that the workshops would be based on would be really good if it came from the shareholders themselves as well. I'm just thinking of the two that were, Arthur and Te Ohu, that were really concerned about the actual environment, the tai ao ake. So if we have some workshops that are based around that, otherwise the workshops might end up trying to cover the whole gamut of stuff and not get any real depth out of the kōrero. Hoi anō hei whakaro noi ho tēnā. Tēnā koutou.
Furthermore, we're talking about 5,000 owners. What's the size of the block? That's going to be that the owners who want to be part of it. How are we going to handle that?
Kia ora, te waratau koutou katoa. So yes, really good idea that the survey itself is just an opportunity to answer the questions, but also there's a wider opportunity to share your feedback. And picking up on your kōrero, Unuku, let's make sure that if there are particular topics for discussion at workshops, you put those forward as well. This is not about dictating to you. So if the questions come from Georgina around the process, personally, I can give you my commitment that all of the engagement, be it orally through oral speaking time or your feedback on the web or the survey, all of that is going towards informing the trustees as to the best direction to take on behalf of the owners. Nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you for your constructive participation. I want to make an acknowledgement, as we did at the start, to all of you who were saddened by the loss of Pirihira, and I was personally really honoured to have known her for a short time and to have felt her guidance around the trustee table. Emily, I know you've lost a good mate there, and you're holding up mana wahine around the trustee table, so my condolences to you and all of the Fenwick family. Nō reira, that's going to end our kōrero today. I'm going to pass it back to the trustees, please, to Waratau or Unuku or Anaru, whoever you wish, to close our hui off, and we will look forward to seeing owners again at the next participation. Nō reira, tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou katoa.
Leo, can I just say one little kōrero? Taku whakaro, the man nui he tauturangi Māria. Me aroha ki tangata, ki tangata, ki tangata. And what we're doing here for our trust, on behalf of our owners, it's not just for ourselves, but it is for the sake of our future generations to come. And we need to work together as a whānau katoa to get these kaupapas done for the sake of our tamariki of the future. Mō nai nei, me the future. Tēnā koutou katoa. Ai.
Purua ti mai te tau te rangi ki a tīna ki whina ki tīna te manora, tīna tuku te manora ki hea. Tīna tuku te manora ki rangi nui e toa ki rā ki papatua nuku e takatoa ke nei. Tīna tuku te manora ki o tātou kui o tātou karau e noho ana i a rātou kāinga. Ki piki te ora, ki piki te ora. Tīna tuku te manora ki ngā whānau e tā mena ki te pauritanga. Aida, ko te whānau a pirihira, a tāwira, a moana mā, ko waiake, ko waiake. Tīnā tuku te manora e noho tahi nei, e whakarongo tahi nei, e mahi tahi nei, kia puta tātou ki te whai ao ki te ao mārama. Ko ia rā e rongo whakire ki rongo tuturu whakamaua ki China, hui e, tāi ki. A kia rano tātou.
Amen.